Oh my God. It's like elementary school, literally. Yeah, they're like, they're not doing like a full coup, but this is basically what's going on in Brazil is like super consistent with what America does all the time. America has like baked this in. Like the Republican Party in the United States of America has baked voter suppression into its calculations of how to win elections, right? And Bolsonaro is basically doing that, but uh, doing that, but on the day of. Like it's kind of like when you you want to cheat, but you didn't actually like prepare enough. Like you didn't write a cheat sheet before the exam, so you're just trying to cheat the day of. Like if America is the ultimate, like if the Republican Party in the United States of America is the best at like voter suppression and like building this kind of inefficiency into the system to ensure that poorer voting blocks have a significantly harder time voting and getting their getting their voices to be heard in the democratic arena. These guys, Bolsonaro looks at that and goes, "Oh, that's a pretty good idea. I should probably do that somehow. I should probably do that as I should try and do that exact same thing." Okay? Bolsonaro lost by millions of votes. This is a drop in the bucket. It's not going to work. Uh, we'll see. Anyway, we'll see. Um, the electoral Supreme Court Chief Justice is giving a press conference right now. According to him, the operations are being ended, and from their investigation so far, no buses were forced to return to their place of origin. I don't know if I believe it. It sounds like he's just trying to decrease tensions. All right. When can we expect results? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how they fucking tabulate. I don't know what to. I don't know what regions are. Results are in 2 hours. Okay, thank you. One PST is when the results start. There you go. I mean, these are what? These are tabulations, but they're, I guess, this is Rio Grande do Sul. Okay. The last election. Okay, guys. Um, Brazil's U.S. installed fascist Bolsonaro regime is engaging in massive voter suppression in today's election. The military was deployed, police are blocking voters in pro Lula strongholds, and public transportation has been disrupted. Bolsonaro is trying to steal
I'm here
the
at
election.
the University of South. Voting continues around Brazil on this election day. We have presidential elections, the runoff between Jair Bolsonaro, incumbent, and of course former President Lula da Silva. We also have runoff elections in several states of the country for the office of governor. I'm here at the University of Sao Paulo's law faculty, and we have about 3 hours remaining for the vote. The biggest development right now is what seems like a large number of denouncements saying that there is some sort of voter suppression, particularly in the Brazilian Northeast, which is a Lula favored area of the country. Reports have come in from several places around the country denouncing non-compliance with the mandatory free public transportation on Election Day. Buses and trains have been stopped, delayed, canceled, or they've been subject to police checkpoints by the Brazilian Federal Highway Police and have oftentimes been retained. People are denouncing roadblocks as people make their way to voting centers. Yesterday, a decision was made by the president of the Supreme Electoral Court, which prohibits the Federal Highway Police from carrying out operations aimed at public transportation of voters until the end of today's voting. People are highly reliant on that transportation that's supposed to be provided in cities.
Joe M. Palm, the Fox News of Brazil, is claiming that the buses have been stopped by highway police are carrying illegal voters. Brazil as a country and Brazilian politics, especially with Bolsonaro, are the closest that you can get to America, right? Like when we look at European fascism and shit like that, that has a robust history that goes back to roots that go beyond the United States of America. But when we talk about Brazil and the exportation of brain rot, like American brain rot, Brazilian politics is a 1-to-1 almost. It's the closest you can get to it. Bolsonaro has literally copied Donald Trump's flow word for word. But of course, given the history of Brazil and the military ties that Bolsonaro has, and like its own history being different than the United States of America, obviously there's some significant differences there. But as far as like the counters, as far as the rhetoric that goes on, like trans children, queering the youth, illegal voters, can't be like Venezuela. Look at how bad Venezuela is. That type of shit is nearly identical to American politics. COVID-19 is fake, that sort of stuff. And, Bolsonaro, it seems, is pulling yet another American-style conservative move here as he tries, and I hope fails, to suppress the vote on the day of voting. In America, you don't have to do this shit on the day of because Republicans, conservatives in general, like I said already, have built in voter suppression into their strategy. They do it not on the day of, they do it every other day. They make sure that polling stations are closed. They make sure that people are purged from the voter rolls. Brazil, on the other hand, much like many other countries that are not the United States of America, will either do voting on a weekend, on a Sunday, when no one's working on purpose, and will even have free public transportation on the day of so that everyone has the means to go out and vote. Okay? So, like, America doesn't even have any of that shit. So obviously it sounds weird when I cover it and I say, oh, free public transit is being disrupted on voting day. And you're like, what? You're like, what? What is public transit? What is free public transit? I don't understand any of these concepts. If you're an American, you're like, I don't get it. Okay? These are things that they already have so that there is higher voter participation, okay? And Bolsonaro is working against that in a very American way, but it almost feels like I said, it almost feels like he plagiarized like America's homework. He basically stole America's homework, but he did it on the day of instead of setting up the system to fail deliberately. And from what I understand and from what these reports are saying, it seems like the suppression is active in northeastern territories that are Lula strongholds. Okay? On Saturday, Lula and Sao Paulo state government candidate Fernando Haddad took part in a street parade on Paulista Avenue alongside former Uruguayan president Jose Pepe Mujica. Mujica was also seen inside the car of Sao Paulo Congressman-elect Guilherme Boyos. The picture went viral. Boyos' car is a popular model, and Mujica became famous for owning an old Volkswagen Beetle even while in the presidency. Minas Gerais, a court decision ordered state-owned company CBTU to offer free rides on Election Day. However, the company refused to do so earlier today, claiming it had not been officially informed of the court decision. This is significant. Okay. President Bolsonaro visited the Galeão International Airport in Rio de Janeiro today to welcome local football club Flamengo after their Copa Libertadores triumph in Ecuador. Mr. Bolsonaro posted for photos lifting the trophy, doing like the classic, kissing babies, but Brazilian style shit. Federal Accounts Court audit confirms the reliability of the Brazilian voting system. It took over 5.8 million votes published and printed receipts from over 4,100 voting machines, cross-checking them with the results, and there were no discrepancies. So they're not cheating the voting, the vote tabulation. They're trying to do voter suppression. But instead of doing voter suppression year-round to ensure that, like, on the day of, you literally cannot go out and vote with ease, they're trying to do this in a country where there's, I think it's compulsory, right? Let's look. Is Brazilian voter... Oh, it is, yeah. Brazil has compulsory voting, so you have to vote. Okay? For those of you who don't know, Brazil has compulsory voting for literate citizens between 18 and 70 years old, including those who live abroad. Which, by the way, again, you have to go out and vote. Even if you don't vote for anyone, you have to still go out and vote. And the reason why they do that is because they want to increase voter participation, right? What the fuck? I'm getting notifications 50 minutes into the stream. It used to give them like 5 minutes in. I don't know what's going on, but that's why I post on Instagram, and that's why I post on Twitter as well when I'm live. And that's why I ask you guys to fucking juice the tweets when I'm live. Because I want everyone to be informed. You know what I mean? It might be the EU time change. I live abroad and I didn't get an invitation to go vote. So Bolsonaro is going against the system that has compulsory voting, that has like built-in safeguards to ensure as many people vote as possible. So that's already going to be difficult, okay? By the way, those who do not vote in an election and do not later present an acceptable justification, such as being away from their voting location at the time, are subject to a fine. It's a baby fine, but it doesn't matter. It's like it's symbolic. Proof of voting compliance by having voted, justify the absence, or pay the fine is required for some transactions such as obtaining a passport, admission to a public university, government employment, and loans from a government-owned bank. There is significant opposition to compulsory voting, and despite the enforcement, about 30 million Brazilians, over 20% of registered voters, did not vote in the 2018 election. The fine is like 65 cents USD. So, Hasan, there's a coup happening in Brazil. When you come into the chat and the first thing you type is Hasan, there's a coup happening in Brazil, while I'm literally covering Brazilian elections, I don't know what to do. I want to put you on a fucking spaceship, okay? And just launch you into the sun. Like, shut the fuck up. Okay? Stop being fucking hysterical. And 2, shut the fuck up. Just shut up. I'm literally talking about it right now. How do you do suppression in a compulsory system? Genuine question. Well, just like this. One, you make the state transit refuse to do free transit on the day of the election, which you're supposed to, right? This is an amenity offered to every citizen, specifically to increase voter participation. So you change that. Then you use the federal police to put blockades in roads, stop buses where buses full of people. You do some level of voter intimidation that way. Okay? Fine isn't the issue, but you need to take care of it because it could be a hassle not being up to date. Yeah. Anyway, former President Lula's campaign requested the Superior Electoral Court to subpoena the head of Brazil's Federal Highway Police for several cases of alleged voter suppression. Okay? Under Bolsonaro, Brazil's highway police prefers force over human rights. Once celebrated for his work, Brazil's Federal Highway Police, PRF in Portuguese, is now taking a more hands-on and violent role. Videos are published on social media. This has been coming out this morning, showing that Federal Highway Police agents are conducting operations and causing traffic jams in mostly rural areas. Twitter users are complaining that these operations mostly hinder poorer voters who tend to lean towards Lula. Here's some videos of this, like where they're setting up blockades and basically engaging in voter intimidation and voter suppression. The goal of the Federal Highway Police is to stop, at this point, stop people from going out and voting.
Deixando passar nada aqui. Bocado preso já.
Okay? Important. Silvani Vasquez, the head of the Brazil Federal Highway Police, asked his Instagram followers to vote for President Bolsonaro. He later deleted the post. Earlier on Sunday, the Superior Electoral Court subpoenaed Vasquez to explain cases of alleged voter suppression. Motherfucker literally was, hogs, universal, ACAP, universal principle. Remember, they're pigs in Brazil, they're pigs in America, they're pigs everywhere. This is the least surprising thing I've ever fucking heard, okay? There are more details on it. On alleged voter suppression, the Federal Highway Police increased the number of routine searches on vehicles on Sunday, Brazil's runoff election day, by 80% when compared to October 2, the first round. Off-duty officers were called to work to fulfill the high number of police operations. In all, a total of 3,100 officers were called up. One federal highway police officer who spoke to the Brazilian Report under condition of anonymity called the move unusual. And now the Lula campaign is requesting the arrest of PRF boss Silvani Vasquez. The controversial operations are happening in poorer areas, and they're targeting poorer voters who tend to lean towards Lula, according to the polls. Okay? Look at where they're doing. Look at where they're conducting operations. Here's more breaking news. Brazil's Chief Electoral Justice Alexandre de Moraes denies the need to extend the election, saying that federal highway police operations did not deprive Brazilians from voting. So shocking. So interesting. A famous journalist wrote on Twitter, "My son took 3 hours to get from Tijuca to Campo Grande, reason 3 blitz. In the second one, the policeman asked, 'Are you going to vote right?' My son, 'Yes,' in Bolsonaro. The policeman said, 'So you won't be stopped anymore.' Then he stuck a sticker on the car window." That's insane. But again, it's like first-hand accounts, so I don't know. Despite Justice Moraes' comments, which he based on data from the electoral courts and the Federal Highway Police, many people are still struggling to reach their electoral zones. In Mato Grosso State, for instance, indigenous leaders in the Xingu National Park say many local communities were unable to vote due to a lack of transportation. In the meantime, Brazilians on social media turned coup d'etat into a trending topic. An army operation is happening on the bridge linking Rio de Janeiro and Niterói went viral. There's also an army operation happening. I don't know what the fuck that's about. So Bolsonaro is pulling out all the fucking stops to ensure that Lula does not win. There couldn't be a more clear example of the role of the bourgeois state in the use of monopoly violence than this. We have militarized police, by the way. I mean, yeah, this is... this is, like I said, something that is institutionalized in America, but in a country like Brazil where they have compulsory voting, Bolsonaro is trying to do it last second. Military police got on public while in uniform, transportation, and told people to not vote for Lula. Do not support ex-inmate. This is what these operations by the PM, PRF, and PF throughout Brazil are all about. Electoral crime and coercion of voters. It is Bolsonarism given its last cry of despair.
Tá ouvindo bem? Então vou ser breve. A nossa presença aqui ela tem uma justificativa. Qual é? Inibir ações criminosas. Sou sargento Maurício aqui da 14ª CI, faço parte desse trabalho. Por quê? No passado as linhas passavam por aqui, elas foram alvo de várias ações criminosas. Mas nós trabalhamos muito de forma técnica, rigorosamente dentro da lei, intensificando as abordagens. Nesses coletivos nós aprendemos.
I have no idea what the fuck this dude's saying. He's saying he's trying to stop crime. I don't want to sound alarmist, but there's a serious attempt at a coup happening in the open right now in Brazil. The federal traffic police, along with state police and elements of the army, are trying to suppress the vote across the country. I will continue to post updates. Here's the supposed order from Bolsonaro supporting Director General of the Federal Traffic Police. We already covered this, right? And he's like carrying out operations against public transport. For those of you who don't understand, for Americans, public transport is profoundly important in other countries because they do not have an exclusively car-reliant infrastructure, especially for poorer people. That's precisely the reason why public transit is free on election day. It's supposed to be free so that everyone can go to everyone can go to the nearest voting location and be able to go out and vote. Okay? The Lula campaign has asked the Electoral Court to take action against the director of the Federal Traffic Police. If it doesn't, I fear the worst. Here's footage showing the military working with the police to illegally suppress votes outside of the city of Niterói, just on the other side of the bay from Rio. Here, this is another video that I wanted to show you guys. This is the first time it's been free. I'm saying other places will make it. There's a reason why, for example, it's on Sunday. Why is it on Sunday? Why do people vote on Sunday? Or why do people vote on federal holidays? That's so that everyone can go out and vote. Anyway, here's the video of the PRF, as you can see, stopping people from going out and voting. Some of them are getting gung-ho about it and openly stating their antagonism towards Lula. Others are just stopping buses, stopping public transport. Public transit is, the means for poorer people who are more likely to vote for Lula to get to the voting stations and be able to exercise their democratic right. The head of the Electoral Court is about to speak, but this is the guy responsible for the attempted coup. We already covered that. The latest reporting indicates that more than 560 took place, with as many as over 3 million voters affected. They were distracting us with talk over the electronic voting booths and stolen radio adverts while planning this. The operation was planned in the presidential palace on October 19th. It seems as if the Electoral Court is bending over for the police and won't do anything besides an order to end the operations. The entire week that precedes the elections, no one can be arrested, so this blockade is just to retain voters, delay shit. Why not lie and vote for Lula anyway? Man, we're talking about 3 million people who could have been potentially impacted by this. Marginal things like this genuinely put the fear of God in everyday citizens. What are you talking about? That's why we have, like, here, even in America, we have what is it called? Fuck. We have rules against, like, what you can and can't wear to the polling station, for example. It's, electioneering. You can't influence people at the polls. Yeah, I heard. The pro-Bolsonaro congresswoman drew her weapon in Sao Paulo as well. This was something that happened yesterday, I think. In years of voting here in Brazil since 1989, I've never seen a security operation as big and threatening as this one. Like, this is a lighter version of things to come. You can see this as a stress test, or what is it, like a trial balloon? Is that what the term is? You can either see this as a stress test for more military presence, or you can see it as like, you know, a soft coup. And if he's doing shit like this, it makes it all the less likely that Bolsonaro will concede even if Lula wins, which is also terrifying. So if he's like willing to fucking weaponize the federal police and factions of the army, which do have allegiances with Bolsonaro, some of the factions of the army, all of a sudden, even if he fucking loses, things can escalate. Did I miss who pissed him off? What is this attitude at everything? Are you talking about Bolsonaro or you're talking about me? In Brazil, the national vote tally determines the election, so suppressing votes in certain areas and certain states can have national implications. Bus companies have also tried and failed to overturn the obligation to provide free transport on election day to disenfranchise poor voters. Lula's Workers' Party has reportedly already filed a complaint with the federal authorities, but we already know the impact of that. The federal authorities said, no, just halt the operations, but, you know, there's no reason to extend the time, like the final hour that you can vote. Majority of those generals publicly supported the military dictatorship and torture many times, including fucking Bolsonaro, who is a torturer himself and has said that a military dictatorship would be a better future for Brazil. And then won the election, by the way. He said that last time, and then he won the election. So think about that for a second. Like, if you want to understand the mentality of Bolsonaro voters, recognize that, like, they're open to that kind of thing. They're not thinking about it like, oh man, you know, it sure would be shitty if there was a military dictatorship in the country. They're like, no, actually, that'd be sick, because then we could just be as brutal as we want to our enemies, to socialists, to communists. Okay? Bolsonaro managed to say that the 2018 elections were fraudulent, where he himself won. I know. You know who else said that? Donald Trump. Because Bolsonaro is literally just trying to be Donald Trump. He is using, like, in other countries, some of these people have, like, long-standing fascist opinions and ideological roots that, ideological opinions that override their interest in, like, trying to copy America's flow. Bolsonaro is not one of those people. He very clearly monitors, almost like Ron DeSantis, exactly what Donald Trump does and tries to recreate it in Brazil, even if it's a detriment, okay? The only thing he's done better than Donald Trump is literally he's gotten COVID like 100 times. I mean, this motherfucker's been stabbed. He didn't die. He's gotten COVID like 100 times. He didn't die. He had the hiccups so aggressively that he had to go to the hospital and pump like poop directly out of his nose pounds and pounds of fucking poop out of his nose and nothing happened. He famously last week said he's not a pedophile, which is an insane thing to say. He talked on a fucking podcast about how he met this sexy, and I'm using the terms that he used, okay? He met an attractive 14-year-old girl, he said, okay? Which is like, immediately, it's like, what the fuck? Yeah, he was just driving around in his fucking Vespa, met an attractive 14-year-old girl, he said. This girl, they hit it off. This is his words. They hit it off. She brought him back to her house, and she was Venezuelan, and the house was full of sex trafficked minors. And he just left. He just left the house. He didn't do anything. He just kept that story with himself and then, decided to talk about it. But then everyone was like, bro, you just said the 14-year-old girl was hot and you didn't do anything about like these supposed sex trafficked Venezuelan girls, right? So why didn't you do that? So then the campaign literally released a fucking video. Or not a video. The campaign literally released a fucking ad saying Bolsonaro is not a pedophile. Does anyone have that? Yeah, he goes, here's the story with the fucking subtitles. Bolsonaro's tale on a podcast that aired yesterday of how after feeling some chemistry with a 14-year-old girl, he followed her into a brothel full of Venezuelan children, has supporters insisting he's not a pedophile. Watch the subtitled video and see for yourself. If you want to understand how Brazilian politics operates, by the way, this is identical, again, to conservative movements here in America. After all, Donald Trump has said things about how beautiful very young girls are. But also Roy Moore comes to mind immediately, who very openly did pedophilia, and yet the entire National Republican Party backed him in Alabama.
Eu estava em Brasília, na comunidade São Sebastião, se não me engano.
Said I was riding my motorcycle in South Sebastião. They complain he's riding a motorcycle. I do. I also ride a jet ski, a horse, a donkey. I stopped in a corner and pulled off my helmet and saw 3 or 4 pretty little girls, 14 or 15 years old, all dressed up on a Saturday in a slum. And I saw they all looked alike. There was some chemistry. Bro, pretty little girls, they're 14 and 15 visibly. There's chemistry. Can I come into your house is what he asked. He's kicking game at 14-year-olds in the fucking made-up story in his mind, okay? Why? Out of all the fucking stories he could have made up, why the fuck did you decide to make up a story where you're a pedophile? Can I come into your house? There was some chemistry, so I said, can I come into your house? And I went in. There were 15 to 20 girls in there on a Saturday morning dressing up, all Venezuelans. And I asked, why are pretty little girls like you all getting dressed up on a Saturday?
Meninas bonitinhas, 14, 15 anos, se arrumando no sábado, pra quê? Ganhar vida.
And they said, to make a living. I don't understand. Like, the story that he was trying to make here, the story that he was trying to say is, like, obviously, Venezuelan communism has created a system in which, like, there are, little girls being sex trafficked, right? It's supposed to be a scary story about, like, Venezuela and communism and immigration and what's happening to human beings as a consequence of communism. Bolsonaro, of course, is, like, the opposite of that, right? So he's trying to describe this situation, this scenario. But because he's such a creepy fucking pervert, yes, he admitted all this unprompted. He made up a story where he still came across like a fucking creepy pervert. Even worse, after all this blew up, he sent his wife and the women's right minister to the place to intimidate those girls and recording a video denying he's a pedo. It's insane. The story is real, but the girls were dressing up for church. Oh, okay. This is beyond dumb politics. We have reached the next level of depravity and lies. That's not even the first time. There was another live stream where a little girl says that she started early, and he looks at her with a perverted look and says, "Started early, really?" And she says, "Yes, I started to sing early." And the girls weren't making a living. They were getting ready for mass. I mean, dude, every part of this story, literally, like, even if that was a real brothel, like the way that this creepy psychopath is claiming it was, he still is in the wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, he took a story that seems insane because, like, in the fucking hypothetical story you made up in your fucking mind, even if this wasn't a hypothetical story. I mean, this is probably not a hypothetical story. This is not a fake story. But, like, the story that he is telling, he's literally saying he's a pedophile. Why would you follow a 14-year-old girl into her home? Why did you say that a 14-year-old little girl was sexy or attractive, hot? It's fucking psychotic. Like, can I come into your house? Who does that? He said there was chemistry between him and a 14-year-old girl. They were innocent and simply existing, and he thinks that's the most viable option. No, it just, like, it doesn't make sense. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's just a man in his 60s who feels chemistry with the 14-year-old children, but does not have relations with them. Why, as the president of Brazil, did he not report an international child sex trafficking operation to the authorities? Exactly. Like, he was the president at this point. Like, he's saying he was the president by this point. People are not just defending him, people are still voting for him. It's embarrassing that he has a big chance of winning today's election. Yeah. It's fucking insane. Anyway, it's just one of the many things that have been completely psychotic about the Brazilian elections and just Bolsonaro in general, other than the routine visits to the hospital. The director of the Federal Highway Police, we already talked about that. He's a big supporter. Head of Brazil's Superior Electoral Court orders Federal Highway Police Director to immediately cease and explain operations that are impeding buses full of voters. We already talked about that. Army soldiers are reportedly participating in an illegal roadblock at the Rio-Niterói Bridge run by Federal Highway Police. Niterói City across the bay from Rio de Janeiro voted for Lula in the first round by 3.66. Obstruction of creating barriers to voting is a crime in Brazil. The Federal Highway Police, run by a self-declared Bolsonaro supporter, Federal Police, Army, and State Police forces are targeting and searching buses full of voters in pro-Lula areas. Only 2 hours of voting left. Globo is reporting that today's voter suppression efforts by federal police forces were the first planned in a meeting in the inner circle of Bolsonaro's campaign in the presidential palace on October 19th. Voting in Brazil ends in, I believe, half an hour. Bolsonaro's campaign source quoted by Globo, "You wouldn't even need to give an explicit order or anything, as these police officers are basically composed of supporters of the president. The consequences of such an operation is obvious." Here's the video of the mayor of the town in what is it? How do you say this? Quite? I don't know. In the northeastern state of Paraíba, which is majority pro-Lula, in front of a federal highway police checkpoint that he says is intended so that some people do not come vote. Yeah, half an hour, but it could be extended if the electoral minister decides. No, the electoral minister literally decided not to extend it and said that the voting has not been compromised. Alexandre de Moraes, president of the Superior Electoral Court, is giving a press conference about the Brazilian elections. An hour ago, he literally said that the police operations were conducted using transport law. This delayed voters from being able to vote, but in no case did it prevent anyone from voting. In no case did the vehicles return to their place of origin. And he said that the operations that were stopping buses will be investigated, but he just is claiming that voters were simply just delayed and weren't stopped from voting. But ultimately, up to 3 million people in various different areas, 3 million poorer people that are using public transport were delayed in voting. So Maurice is making claims that he cannot possibly confirm that no voter was prevented from voting or returned home. He's essentially washing over a clear attempt by Bolsonaro to use police power to suppress votes in order to skew the election in his favor. President's Superior Electoral Court says voter suppression by police reportedly planned and ordered by Bolsonaro campaign did not actually suppress votes, and he will not extend the hours of operation of polling stations to compensate. There it is. He literally admitted that delays were happening, but then said, but they were not significant enough. The delays were not significant enough for him to extend voting. And people are saying Alexandre de Moraes is against Bolsonaro. So I wonder why. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about him to give you an adequate answer here. But things that I suspect is, one, he could be fearful of additional military retaliation. Two, he could feel comfortable that Lula's odds of winning are still super high. And three, he could be an institutionalist, which is the worst kind. Like institutionalist lib who says, yeah, they're kind of cheating, but they're not cheating enough that like it actually requires me to take some kind of judicial action. Because a lot of people, like, it seems like from the commentary or from what he is, from his statements, it seems like it's the third one where it's like, well, yeah, they're kind of cheating, but they're not cheating hard enough. They're cheating within the system. So, you know, please stop doing that. But also, you know, they didn't actually stop anybody and like directly tell them to go fucking home. So I guess maybe, you know, we should continue. Bolsonaro has a strong narrative against the judiciary. He does not want to give ammunition to Bolsonaro to contest the elections. Yeah, except it doesn't fucking matter what Bolsonaro's narrative against the judiciary is, because win or lose, Bolsonaro is still going to shit on him. Win or lose, Bolsonaro is still going to, especially if he loses, Bolsonaro is still most likely going to try to engage in some kind of military action, it seems like. So, I mean, hopefully I'm wrong. It's worth pointing out that Alexandre de Moraes, the president of the Superior Electoral Court, has been very pro-police throughout his career, but he's also been one of the main targets of Bolsonarista anger due to his many rulings against the president. Moraes is actually doing a lot to put a break in Bolsonaro's campaign filled with lies. The Bolso minions fucking hate him, but I don't really know what the fuck is up with his decision. Maybe he's afraid. I don't know. I mean, if he's an institutionalist, and that is the answer, he could be like a right-wing institutionalist, not want Lula to win, but also despise Bolsonaro like a never-Trump Republican, you know what I mean? Despise Bolsonaro because Bolsonaro is unkempt and kind of like gives the game away, ruins the game for institutionalist right-wingers a little bit, and you know, and ultimately still wants to maintain the presence of law and order above all else. I mean, there are a lot of things that are wrong that aren't prosecutable under the law. Just because somebody realizes, that doesn't mean actually they like or endorse. No, judges have leniency. Judges have a way to interpret pre-existing rules that that he could absolutely use in this circumstance. He openly states that yes, delays happened as a consequence of the PRF actions, which means he has ample ground to, he has, yes, judicial discretion. Thank you. He has literal fucking reason that he has stated openly for extending at least the last moment that you can the last moment that you can actually, vote. Like he could 100% extend the voting time. And he has that power. He has enough reason to do so, and he's refusing to do so, and it's weird. Anyway, he could be voting. He could be extending the deadline, but he hasn't. I mean, they carried out 514 inspections against buses by 12:35 p.m. this Saturday in violation of an order of the Superior Electoral Court. Anyway, will all this voter suppression end up ruining Lula's chances? I don't think so,
Brazilians
but
voted
we'll
for
see.
their next president.
Here.
And most of the votes went to two frontrunners. One was current president and far-right leader Jair Bolsonaro.
Nós defendemos cada vez mais a família tradicional.
And the other was Brazil's former president, the left-wing politician
Traditional family.
Lula da Silva, also known as Lula.
Portanto, o país que eu deixei,
I gotta pee, I'll be back.
que o povo tem saudade.
For months leading up to the election, Lula pulled very well against Bolsonaro and was expected to win comfortably in the first round. But when the results came in, Lula's lead was small. As of this video, he and Bolsonaro are set to face each other in a runoff. Lula is Brazil's most famous and popular politician. At one point during his presidency, his approval rating was nearly 90%. But Brazilian politics has changed, and the story of Lula's career is a good way to see exactly how. Lula's left-wing politics are rooted in his days as a factory worker and a union leader.
That's where he began his career as a politician.
During Brazil's military dictatorship, Lula led massive strikes and protests. By the 1980s, he had helped organize thousands of trade union supporters into a political party, the Workers' Party, or the PT. Lula's coalition drew mainly from Brazil's political left. It included the working class, low-income people, left-leaning Catholic voters, Afro-Brazilians, and indigenous people.
This is a pretty unique arrangement of forces. In my opinion, it's one of the things that allowed the Workers' Party to grow and become so strong.
In 1989, Lula ran as his party's candidate for president. He made it to the second round and lost by only 4 million votes. Then he lost again in 1994 and again in 1998. His base was growing, but not yet enough for him to win a presidential election. During much of this time, Brazil was experiencing an economic crisis. At one point, inflation was so out of control that the country switched its new currency 5 separate times in 7 years. And about a fifth of the country was in poverty. In the late 1990s, Brazil's center-right-led government passed a series of dramatic economic reforms. They brought inflation down by establishing a stable currency, and they brought down poverty. But their recovery also left much of the country behind, including many in Lula's coalition.
O presidente da República está mentindo para a sociedade brasileira, vai enriquecer os ricos e empobrecer os pobres ainda mais.
But in 2002, when Lula ran for president a fourth time, he tried something a little bit different. In the 2002 race, Lula brought several members of Brazil's conservative and center-right parties into his campaign, including prominent businessman José Alencar as his running mate. By including them, Lula expanded his coalition, attracting the support of center-right voters, like business owners and bankers.
Lula is this guy that he can go to a board meeting at a major bank or to a poor favela and speak in a way that people will relate to him.
This new kind of coalition led to Lula winning his first presidential election.
Prometo manter, defender e cumprir a Constituição.
In Lula's first term, Brazil's economy grew rapidly, mostly because of a booming trade partnership with China.
He benefited from a magical economical moment
He used this cash flow to finance a new social welfare and cash transfer program, Bolsa Familia, which gave Brazilians a stipend for
This is what blew his shit up.
ensuring their children were attending school and up to date on their vaccines.
It was a way to give people money for their immediate needs while getting them to put their kids on the path that would eventually help them escape that cycle of poverty.
This program, along with other reforms like increasing the minimum wage, also grew his coalition even further. And more Brazilians voted for left and center-left politicians across the country.
The economy picked up, and then we had this massive period of growth. Lula became an unstoppable force.
By the end of his first term in office, Lula's approval rating reached over 60%. And even though his administration began to attract accusations of bribery and corruption, Lula's unprecedented popularity and coalition building led to a re-election victory in 2006. By the end of Lula's second term in office, GDP was the highest in Brazil's history. And so was the president's approval rating.
The most popular politician on earth.
In 2009, Lula picked a fellow Workers' Party member, Dilma Rousseff, as his successor. She inherited his coalition and easily won the presidency in 2010. Early in her administration, global demand for commodities fell, which led to a recession in Brazil. And her approach to managing the economy cost her some support from the center-right business community. Her administration also faced accusations of corruption, which cost her even more support.
It didn't help that she was...
By the way, it's Brazilian politics. So there's no aspect of Brazilian politics that is devoid of corruption, for the record. Just so you understand. When people say oh, dude, what the fuck, Lula's corrupt or whatever, it's dude, what are you talking about? First of all, his level of corruption did not meet the actual fucking standard and was significantly less. And not only that, but the main person who prosecuted him was, again, a Bolsonarista who ended up getting elevated to the fucking highest judicial position in the country and is no longer in that position because it came out due to, I can't believe I'm saying this, Glenn Greenwald's and his team's investigative reporting that was largely falsified. The car wash operation was largely just made up bullshit so that they could throw this motherfucker in jail.
Not a good politician. She did not negotiate with Congress in a very skillful way, and the economic guidance of her administration was very flawed.
And then in 2014, something happened that would lead to the entire coalition's collapse. A government investigation found that many Workers' Party officials were involved in a corrupt scheme with Brazil's state-owned oil company, including Rousseff, whose approval rating tanked, and in 2016, she was removed from office. Lula was also implicated for allegedly taking bribes. He was convicted in 2017 and sent to prison. But unlike Rousseff, he remained popular.
For a lot of people, despite Lula going to jail, they still love him. For one, a lot of people say, well, they all rob us. At least this guy was giving us back something.
But with no one there to hold the left coalition together, the opportunity...
Okay, bro, you have to fucking... What? Bro, this is is this obtuse or intentionally right-wing framing? That's insane. Dog, this video was written and published 5 days ago, not in 2018 or 2017, okay? There is additional information that they're not mentioning. This expert said Lula was successful because of magic. Yeah, not socialism, magic. It's voxel amount, but it doesn't make sense because as the fucking video itself showed, it's not like Lula was, and I hate to admit this, but it's not like he was a fucking genuine threat to American hegemonic power, okay? Lula is not fucking Che Guevara. He's not Fidel Castro. He is, part of his appeal is literally that he is much more middle of the ground. He's a social democrat. He was never a threat to like American institutions in any meaningful capacity. I mean, he's probably like a little bit more than AMLO, but still. So there's no reason to like make this seem like the Lula wasn't unjustifiably jailed.
Emerged for an unusual politician to start building his own from the right. Throughout Rousseff's impeachment, retired military officer Jair Bolsonaro was laying the groundwork for his chance at the presidency in the 2018 election. Bolsonaro's core supporters were evangelicals, farmers, businessmen, and anti-abortion voters. He was the candidate of the far right, but he also gained the support of the center-right, and even some leftist voters who were disillusioned with the Workers' Party, creating a unique coalition.
What?
Meanwhile, Lula's former coalition was split between several candidates, helping propel Bolsonaro to an easy victory, and signaling a new political moment in the country.
What Bolsonaro did in 2018 was unlike.
You know what's funny? I mean, I want to say they're like just talking shit because it's Brazil and no one knows any better. But this coverage is identical to how they talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump created a unique coalition of like white working class people who were disillusioned. It's like, bro, their disillusionment came from racism. Okay. That's number one. And two, why do we maintain this lie that like poor voters overwhelmingly, or poor voters are like turning and voting for the Republican Party? It's like, that's never a real thing. Okay. We do this in America too. That's not real. Okay, that's not. When you look at the stats, it is so consistent. Poorer voters are voting Democrat, okay? And everybody knows it too. No, don't say yes it is. There are poor voters that of course vote for the Republicans. There are poor voters that of course vote for fucking Bolsonaro. Shut the fuck up. But you have to still look at the broader picture. You can't be like, oh, well, I have a poor uncle who voted for fucking Donald Trump and make an assessment off of that. Got to look at the percentages. You have to look at the fucking percentages. And when you look at the percentages in America, poor people are still, when they can vote, okay, voting for Democrat.
Like we had ever seen. It was a real shift. The hard right was replacing the moderate right at the center of the political arena.
In office, Bolsonaro oversaw further destruction of the Amazon, extreme hunger, and Brazil being one of the worst impacted by COVID with over 680,000 deaths. Brazil's GDP dipped back down, and he also took a confrontational stance with Brazilian democracy, trying to control the media and undermining the Supreme Court. Due to these factors, his popularity never exceeded 40%.
Trump.
In 2019, Brazil's Supreme Court released Lula from prison and later annulled his convictions,
yeah, why?
Enabling him to run again in 2022.
Wait, why did they do that? I wonder. I wonder how that happened.
Essa nossa candidatura é uma candidatura que tem como objetivo fundamental, sabe, recuperar esse país.
Lula also positioned himself as a pro-democracy candidate in the race.
Queremos votar para que ninguém nunca mais ouse desafiar a democracia.
He worked to assemble another strong and diverse coalition from across the political spectrum.
Lula has made a front that maybe cannot get broader. 8 former presidential candidates from left and right, a big part of the business community.
Lula even courted evangelicals by campaigning at churches. At the same time, Bolsonaro enacted social reform programs to court low-income and working-class Brazilians, who were usually aligned with Lula. But as the 2022 election approached, Lula's strategy seemed to be working more than Bolsonaro's.
The polls are spot on in regards to Lula. Lula finished the first round with around 48% of the vote, but they were dead wrong about Bolsonaro.
Lula still won the
That's
first
a
round,
consistent issue.
but
It's still an
Bolsonaro
issue.
outperformed every poll leading up to the election. And the bigger surprise was in Brazil's Congress, where the right-wing candidates aligned with Bolsonaro won the majority. So even if Lula goes on to win the presidency, he'll face a stronger opposition than he ever has before.
Lula has made a lot of commitments. It remains to be seen how he will be able to implement that. This is a force that has to be reckoned with. It is part of the Brazilian mainstream politics and will continue like that for years to come.
Motherfucker is so loud, bro. Hold on. He is so fucking loud. It's not even funny. He's screaming in the living room. Only made worse by how shitty the fucking Vikings are. We already covered this. Anyway. Results are going to be coming in the next 5 minutes. One of the main aspects on Bolsonaro's voting bloc is our liberal news that used to cover 24/7 bullshit news about how corrupt Lula's and Dilma's governments were, trying to push our people to the right. However, they pulled so much that now half of our population are Nazis thanks to anti-Lulism our liberal media fomented. Yeah. Yeah. This Vox video ignores the most important aspect, that Lula was found innocent by the courts in the end, and the judge, Sergio Moro, now minister of Bolsonaro's government and his supporter, was determined partial, biased, and unfair. Because he was collaborating with the prosecutors to fucking clap this dude. They unjustifiably jailed the former president in a plot that literally was openly uncovered. And there are still people in this chat that are running with the he's a thief, he's a bad guy, he's a thief. Okay?